Gentlemen, welcome, beautiful soul, to this live masterclass on microdosing, psychedelics. Yeah, for women's health. How are you doing? We are broadcasting live on LinkedIn and YouTube. There were some issues with Facebook, so if you're on Facebook, you're probably just watching us on YouTube. Welcome. I am your host, Dr. 1Dreah Pennington, formerly known as Dr. 1Dreah Pennington. Now 1Dreah is where it's at. So thank you for tuning in. I'm super excited to share this with you. I have a little bit of a nerdy passion for psychedelics, and in particular, how they can help us improve our overall well-being. So today we're going to be talking about the women's health side of that. And to be totally honest, there's not a lot of research. So I am advocating for more research, but I'm going to share what is already out there, and I will take your questions live. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will get to them in just a little bit. All right. And if you have signed up for this webinar, masterclass on one of my web pages, then you will see that you get access to the slides as well as some resources. So I've got all the references that I will be mentioning in today's presentation and in a couple of articles for you. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already done so. All right, my friends. So shall we get into it? I will check back into the chat in a little while. But for now, let us get into today's presentation. So you probably already know, you've heard about microdosing, which is why you're tuned into this masterclass. But over the last several years, there's been a significant increase in the interest in microdosing for a whole range of different issues and well-being. But in women's health in particular, it's a focal point in this conversation because I believe that microdosing may offer unique benefits for the specific challenges that women face. So today we are going to explore the potential for microdosing, and we're talking about things like menstrual health, other hormonal irregularities, and menopause. Sound good? All right. So I mentioned that we'll be speaking about menstrual health, menopause, hormone-related conditions, and I'll share with you what the current research shows. So before we jump into the research, though, let's just have a broad look at women's health issues. So if we look at menstrual health issues, yes, I realize this is a very busy slide. If you signed up, you'll get the slide so that you can read this. But the bottom line is there are a whole host of challenges that women go through on a monthly basis if they're having periods regularly, from mood swings to breast tenderness to cravings, cramping, acne, weight gain. But if we look at this overall, 80% of women experience some form of menstrual discomfort during their reproductive years. And those symptoms could range from mild to severe. Around 20 to 25% of women will suffer from moderate to severe painful periods, which is medically known as dysmenorrhea. And that can actually interfere with their daily activities at that level. If we look at PMS, or premenstrual syndrome, that affects about 75% of women who are menstruating, and 3 to 8% experience even more severe PMS, and that's called PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Now, if we move on to menopause, then typically we're knowing that menopause is defined as missing a period for 12 months or more. That perimenopausal period can last about 8 years. The average age of onset is 51, and there's greater than 5% of women who enter menopause for surgical or other related conditions. And there worldwide, or in the United States rather, there are nearly 50 million women in menopause. So that just gives you a sense of how many women out there could potentially benefit. Now, if we think about the symptoms that people experience during menopause, 40% of women complain of mood swings, anxiety, and depression, whereas 75% of women complain of hot flashes, and 20 to 30% of those find that their symptoms are severe enough to seek out medical help. Moving right along. Now, there are some other unique conditions that women face due to hormones. These include things like polycystic ovary syndrome, and that's about 5 to 10% of women of reproductive age. And this can include things like irregular periods, acne, and infertility. Endometriosis is also in here. 1 in 10 women experience that, which is really a painful disorder where there's tissue similar to the lining of the uterus that grows outside of the uterus. And it's estimated that 20% of women experience chronic pain with things like fibromyalgia and migraines. And this is out of proportion in comparison to men. So we've seen the statistics. We recognize that the importance of finding effective treatments and interventions to improve women's health and well-being is of paramount importance. And I'm going to share with you a little bit why and how microdosing psychedelics got on my radar as a potential support for women. So, first and foremost, what is microdosing? You probably already know this, but microdosing is defined as taking a fraction of a typical therapeutic or recreational dose of a psychedelic substance. Now, the dose is small enough not to cause any hallucinogenic effects, but it still provides potential benefits for mental and physical well-being. So we emphasize the non-hallucinogenic part of it because some people used to say sub-perceptual, but many of us know when we're taking a microdose, we do perceive changes, whether that's in our mood or creativity or the ability to focus. So rather than saying sub-perceptual, we all are now shifting to sub-hallucinogenic, all right? So if we start to think through the different substances that one might potentially consider, psilocybin always comes high on the list. Psilocybin is coming from, in its natural form, psilocybe mushrooms, of which there are 200 different fungi that produce psilocybin. We should be aware, even though in Oregon they're really limiting it to only one strain for their legalized facilitation program. But taking a microdose of psilocybin is typically ranging from 0.1 to 0.3 or 5. So that's 100 up to 500 milligrams that would be considered a typical microdose of psilocybin mushrooms. If you happen to have research quality psilocybin, that's around 5 to 10 milligrams. And many people report when they're microdosing psilocybin that they have enhanced creativity, better mood, and increased focus. And if you've ever heard Paul Stamets talk about it, he says that psilocybin mushrooms make people nicer. I definitely found that with my own microdosing journey, I do find that it impacts my mood by just making things a little bit brighter. And I like that effect. All right, so next up is LSD. A little more tricky to obtain safely, but there are people who really appreciate the benefits of lysergic acid diethylamide. This is a synthetic psychedelic that's known for really potent hallucinogenic effects. But in a microdose, you're typically looking at 5 to 20 micrograms, which is about 1/10 to 1/20th of a full psychedelic dose. Microdosing LSD has been said to enhance people's problem-solving abilities, increase energy levels, and promote emotional stability. Next up is mescaline. I don't have a lot of people in my network who are using this, but it is a naturally occurring psychedelic compound that's found in certain cacti, including the peyote and San Pedro or Huachuma. A microdose of mescaline usually ranges between 10 and 50 milligrams, which is significantly less than the dose required for a full-on experience. People often report having an increase in empathy, heightened sensory perception, and a greater sense of well-being when they're microdosing mescaline. Now, ketamine is not a traditional psychedelic, but I'm including it because I've recently found that many people in my network have been talking about low doses and microdoses of ketamine. So ketamine, as you may know, is a dissociative anesthetic that has been used for decades in surgery and veterinary medicine. I first learned about it when I was doing pediatrics. So it's a very safe anesthetic, and recently it's gained a lot of attention for its potential in treating a variety of mental health disorders, particularly depression and anxiety, and its unique ability to really cut suicidal ideation. So while it's not a classical psychedelic like LSD or psilocybin, in low doses, it has some similarities. So people are telling me that while ketamine is usually delivered IV or IM or as a nasal spray for medical purposes, low doses of ketamine could be taken orally or sublingually in the form of lozenges, and the typical microdose is between 10 and 30 milligrams. Now, with all of these substances, it really can vary a great deal depending on individual factors. But some people do find that low doses of ketamine can increase energy, improve mood, enhance creativity, and reduce anxiety. This one I tend to be a little wary of because ketamine does have the potential for abuse and addiction. So I don't recommend that people get a hold of this through mail order, especially if you have any addiction in your background. And it should ideally be used with a facilitator. But I include it here for being thorough. So if we look specifically at some of the symptoms that taking a sub-hallucinogenic dose of a psychedelic could address, let's get into it. So the first off is mood regulation. So there are studies that suggest that microdosing can enhance mood and reduce anxiety. I will share a couple of studies with you here today. And we think that this might actually help women who experience mood swings or irritability during their menstrual cycles or during menopause. Next up is pain perception. So there's really not a lot of direct research on the effects of microdosing on pain management. There are for ketamine in pain situations, but that's usually a full dose. But there is anecdotal and preliminary evidence that suggests that low doses of psychedelics may actually have analgesic properties, and that could significantly help to reduce menstrual pain in particular. So it's one thing to keep in mind. And again, I'll share some other research findings that back this up. And finally, cognitive difficulties. So microdosing has been reported to enhance creativity, focus, and problem-solving abilities. So you can imagine that for any of us who are around menopause, or if you get that sort of brain fog associated with periods, then this could potentially help. So if we look specifically at a couple of studies that stand out, I obviously can't cover everything. You may have already seen one of my comprehensive literature reviews. See if I can move myself out of the way of Miss Prochaskova. Okay, well, here we go back here. So in Prochaskova and al., they conducted a study to explore the effects of microdosing. Sorry, guys, I'm just going to take myself off camera entirely here for a second. So in her study, they explored the effect of microdosing psychedelics on creativity. This was in an open label natural setting. So they looked at participants who had already planned to microdose with psychedelics, and they had them complete a series of tests assessing their creative thinking, their problem-solving abilities, and their general cognitive function before and after microdosing. Now, the results revealed that microdosing, get back on my screen here, led to increased convergent and divergent thinking, which are key aspects of creativity. And so this study suggests that microdosing psychedelics could have potential benefits in enhancing creativity and problem-solving skills. Now, of course, this study was conducted in an open label, natural setting, which may introduce bias, and it may actually limit the generalizability of the findings, but it's worth noting all the same. Now, there's another study by James Fadiman and Sophia Korb. You may recognize James Fadiman. He is known as one of the godfathers of microdosing. He wrote the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide and Your Symphony of Selves. And in their study, they were looking to explore the effect of microdosing psychedelics on creativity. Not on creativity. They were looking at the potential benefits. And in their research, they collected self-reported data from people who were already microdosing around the world, and they examined the effects of all the substance they took on mood, cognition, and overall well-being. And their study found that many participants reported improvements in their mood. They also noted improvements in focus, creativity, and emotional well-being with really minimal side effects. Now, we do know that the study has been acknowledged for its limitations based on self-reported data, and we do need more rigorous, controlled research to validate the findings. But when you look at the people who have reported in, many women were saying, hey, my periods are easier and better. And I think it's worth taking note, and perhaps we will have some more studies. Next up is a study by Peter Johnstad. And in his study in 2018, it was an interview-based exploration of the experiences of individuals who engaged in psychedelic microdosing. And they really wanted to understand the motivations, the perceived benefits, and the potential risks. The people in his study reported a range of positive outcomes, including enhanced mood, increased creativity, improved problem-solving abilities, and better emotional processing. Now, it's important to note that some people did report drawbacks, including increased anxiety and or psychological discomfort. So once again, this is a study that really highlights the need for more controlled research to really understand the effects and the safety of microdosing. But it's pretty interesting, right? So I'm going to pop back here on screen for you. Say hello. So I see that there's some questions coming in on the chat. Thank you. That's really great. When we get to that point, I will be sure to check your questions. All right. All right, my friends, I am back. I'll get back over here. So let's talk a little bit about the potential mechanisms of action. So what is it that psychedelics are actually doing that might be helping out, in particular for women's health? So we're going to look at a few things, starting off with serotonin receptors. So you may already know serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It plays a crucial role in mood regulation, pain perception, as well as our cognitive functioning. And we know that many psychedelics, including LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin, all interact with multiple serotonin receptors, but we think that their main effects in this case have to do with the 5-HT2A receptor. It may explain why people are experiencing less pain during their periods, better cognitive function, and better moods. Also, neuroplasticity. So this is one thing that we talk about a lot with macro doses or large doses, but we wonder if this might also be implicated with microdosing. So neuroplasticity is known as the lifelong ability of the brain to adapt, to reorganize neural connections, research shows with macro doses or large doses of psychedelics, including LSD, psilocybin, and ayahuasca, that there is a window of neuroplasticity that occurs. And what we see when we look at increased neural flexibility, we're thinking that that may be what contributes to the improvements that we see in mood, cognition, and overall well-being. And one of the kind of interesting things to note here is one of the aspects of neuroplasticity with psychedelics is an increase in something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And what's interesting is that estradiol, which is what some women will be put on in hormone replacement therapy for menopause, estradiol also leads to an increase of BDNF. So one of the questions I've had is, in my own case, I discovered microdosing for myself just as the pandemic hit and I was entering in menopause. I basically wanted to try it for creativity and realized that many of the symptoms that I should have had because of menopause, I didn't have. Now, I did have my doctor put me on hormone replacement therapy. But the question for me has always been, have I been getting a double benefit of being on estradiol and progesterone along with the neuroplasticity benefits we get with microdosing? Don't know. We need to test that out. The other aspect is brain connectivity. So psychedelics do temporarily alter the connectivity patterns within the brain. So parts of the brain that don't normally talk to each other start talking to each other. And that increased communication between different brain regions may underlie these enhancements in creativity, in problem solving, and emotional processing. So you've probably heard that in a macro dose, a heroic dose or going on a ceremony, people are able to process emotions and memories from the past better. And we think that's partly because there's a certain uncoupling of regions that get locked in circuits like PTSD, and a reconnection so that you can process emotions or the past or memories, and then they get stored into memory so that they're not constantly firing and firing. So it could be that microdosing could do that, which is particularly useful for people who are not candidates for large doses, for reasons that we'll get into in a moment. Next up is anti-inflammatory effects. There is emerging evidence that suggests that some psychedelics may have anti-inflammatory properties, and which is super cool, and that could benefit women's health. Inflammation has been linked to several mood disorders. It's been linked to pain, it's been linked to cognitive decline, and even Alzheimer's. So these anti-inflammatory effects could potentially contribute to the benefits that we see in women who microdose. Now, of course, all of these mechanisms of action are just not fully understood. They are being tested, but they're usually with larger doses. So more research is needed to really clarify and explore these potential benefits. But I think there's a pretty good case for it. So next up is hormonal regulation. Now, to be honest, there's really limited evidence on the effects of microdosing psychedelics for hormone regulation. But when we consider that psychedelics do have the potential to enhance mood and reduce anxiety, that could indirectly influence hormone health. So once again, we need further research in this area to see if there is a connection. And finally, stress reduction. This may be one of the ways that psychedelics improve well-being for women. Studies have suggested that microdosing reduces stress, improves overall well-being, and since stress is known to exacerbate menstrual and menopausal symptoms, the potential stress-reducing effects, that may be what's at play. So there are a lot of different mechanisms that we're seeing. It's not just the molecule, there's a whole host of things, and it'll be really interesting to see what the research shows. So, of course, we have to talk about safety, naturally, understanding the risks and precautions. Now, as you've seen in a few of the studies I've mentioned, there is an increased risk of anxiety. and physiological discomfort. This may be a dose-dependent thing. For some people, taking a microdose, which should be sub-hallucinogenic, might work just fine. And if you try to increase that dose, they may see anxiety crop up. So it's really about titrating that dose. But we also use the same warnings that we would use for anyone going with a macro dose. And that is, if you have a history of mania, bipolar 2, if you have a history of schizophrenia or in your family, you would want to use this with caution, if at all. So it's really important to gather information, about your family history, about what medications you're on, about what conditions you have, because these are things you would want to talk over with a psychedelic informed therapist, coach, doctor, what have you. And especially because we don't know the long-term effects and interactions with other medications. We know for large doses, we don't know so much for small doses. There is, this thought that maybe taking small doses could impact heart valves. So this is another one of those things to be mindful of. Now, if we talk about general precautions, we generally say to start with the lowest possible dose. So if you get a package and it says start, 0.4 or the range is 0.1 to 0.4, don't start at 0.4. It's best to start low and then you can adjust. It's advisable, if you're considering doing this, that you avoid situations when you really need mental focus, because if it takes you out, if you're a little too spacey, that's not going to be good for you. If you need your coordination to drive, to chop vegetables, if you are emotionally unstable, that might not be the time when you want to do this. And also, I would suggest not taking your very first few days of microdosing when you need to be driving or operating heavy machinery. It's advisable to consult a professional. There are a lot of great psychedelic integration coaches, doctors, therapists. It's especially important if you have any pre-existing health conditions or you're taking medications. You can find a link on my website if you'd like to do a consultation with me. I also help people before they go on trips if they're going to do a large dose in ceremony. So it's really important that you have some psychedelic informed professional that can provide personalized advice and really look at the interactions with other medications and help you monitor your progress. So if we get into some of the other best practices and recommendations. So here are some general guidelines. I said it before and I'll say it again. Start low and go slow. We've talked about the potential side effects and triggering of mental health issues. So it's really advisable that you really go slowly. So if you signed up for this masterclass, you're going to get a replay and you're going to get a PDF of the slides and some of the documentation on the studies, including information about James Fadiman. So James Fadiman created a protocol just to give people a starting point. It's not like it has to be written in stone, but in his protocol, it's 1 day on and then 2 days off. And all the while, you are tracking the effects over time to see, was that the right dose for you? Do you need it that many days or not? The other dosing protocol is the Stamets protocol, which is 4 to 5 days in a row and then 2 to 3 days off. And it's the same deal here. You want to maintain a consistent routine, continue to assess the effects over time, and see where you land. For me, I remember starting off with 1 day on, 2 days off. And then in my second month, I decided to try 3 or 4 days in a row. And now I found my sweet spot. It'll vary for each person. And you may even find that your dose varies as you get into microdosing. So another recommendation is to set intentions. You really do have the power to influence your microdosing journey. So it's important that you actually set and focus on specific goals. As we're talking about women's health today, which areas of your journey do you want to improve? Is that managing menopausal symptoms? Is that coping with menopausal challenges? Or is it more PMS, PMDD, or pain, or sleep? Really set your intention before. I recommend that you journal. All of my clients get journal prompts and guided meditations to really tune in and track what is happening in your experience. A lot of us will think, oh, I don't really feel anything. And you're just going about your life. And then when you look back on your journal or you reflect back on a month, you realize, wow, I was less edgy. For me, the big thing I noticed was equanimity. I just noticed that the things that would normally irritate me didn't irritate me as much. And so you want to write down, were there any side effects? Did you notice that if you took it with caffeine, you felt different? Or did you take it during a certain time of day? All of those things you'll want to monitor and adjust. So this can really help you identify patterns, make adjustments, and optimize your regimen. All right? Now, you may have already guessed, I'm an integrative physician, so I'm always looking at things in a holistic approach. I don't really imagine that microdosing psychedelics is going to completely erase and replace other things that you're doing for menstrual health or menopause. It really should be considered and included as an integrative or holistic approach. And that includes if you're already on HRT, if that's appropriate for you. Continue the HRT, you're managing your diet, engaging in regular activity and exercise. Keep on practicing stress management techniques, whether that's journaling, writing, meditating, breath work, yoga, being in the garden, and also fostering strong social connections. Like, we know that many of these substances increase empathy and they improve relationships. I can do a whole nother talk about psychedelics and sexual desire and relationship satisfaction. If that's of interest to you, let me know and maybe we'll cover that next time. But it's important to really encourage people to seek out and engage with communities of like-minded people. It's helpful to not go through this journey alone, especially if your friends, family, or other folks don't quite get what you're doing, right? You don't want to go at this alone. It's really useful because then you get to share your experience, share your knowledge, support and get support through the journey. So there's online forums. You may even find local meetups in your town and workshops. I currently host Sacred Psychedelic Saturdays on the first Saturday of every month, and that's at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, 5 in the UK, and 1800 hours here in France. So join us if you feel like you'd like to connect with folks, and you can ask me even more questions. It's on Zoom, so you can come on. You can be anonymous. It's a great way for you to connect and get additional education. And I'm always providing little free resources for folks who are exploring psychedelics. All right, so we've come to the end. I hope that you will join me next week on Wednesday, the 24th. That's when we will go into part 2 of this journey. I'll answer more of the questions that have come in via email and give you some more specifics. All right, so thank you for being here. Very good to have you. I will now pop over and check out the chat, see if here we go. Let's see what we have in questions. Thank you all for being here. Okay. So Melissa asks, is it okay to microdose different substances in an interspersed manner, such as mushroom one day, LSD a couple of days later? Well, Melissa, I would say that the only thing about that is it's going to be really hard to know which one is giving you which effect. Because if you start doing microdosing on a consistent basis, at least with psilocybin and LSD, because it stays in the system a little longer, you're going to eventually get to not a high steady state, but there will be a certain steady state of these molecules in your body and brain. So it would just be really hard for you to know which one is producing the effects. So if you are new to it, I would try one at a time, see how that responds in your body and brain, and you track your symptoms, and then do a month where you're doing the other. But once again, we're here with zero research on this. That might be something that you could suggest to someone for research So my friend Svetlana, are there any recommendations as to the safest way to try? I would personally say that the safest way is making sure that you are getting your supply from a reputable source. I do not have any that I can recommend legally. We're staying on the side of legality here. But if you happen to pop over to Europe, in Amsterdam, you can get your supply completely legally, as well as in Canada, there are shops that you can get it. I will be hosting or co-hosting a women's retreat in the Netherlands the first week of August. So if you'd like to pop over to near Amsterdam, myself and Jessica Lagarde from Women on Psychedelics, we are co-facilitating a retreat where you'll be able to legally and safely obtain psilocybin truffles and sit in ceremony with us. All right. Okay. Andy asks, is there one strain of mushroom that is better for creativity? Well, my friend, I cannot say because I haven't tried all of them. I mean, there are over 200 strains. But I think in general, most people find that all of them increase creativity. So I think you'll have to do your own citizen science research and let us know. All right, so Andy also asks, I have been microdosing for 3 weeks with mushroom gummies, and I'm wondering if it's better to ingest the actual mushroom. You know, this is a question that I have asked as well. I'm very, very curious to know if in making it into a gummy, do you lose any of the psilocybin? We know that heating psilocybin, because normally we give it in a tea form at retreats, that doesn't have any, terrible properties. People make it into chocolates and it does well. So in theory, a gummy might be fine. Now, the only thing with gummies and with chocolates is stirring it in. Usually people are drying the mushrooms, grinding them into a powder, and then adding them into whatever they're making. So you never really know if it's perfectly mixed. If that bar or that gummy, does it actually have just 0.1? We never know, but I think you would have to test and know for yourself. All right, are there any other questions? Melissa says, I heard two opinions regarding taking psychedelic medicines during your period. Some say the body is already going through a lot and it's best to avoid. Others say it can be amazing to connect with your own body. What's my opinion? Well, my opinion is if you happen to have a challenge getting in connection with your body or finding acceptance for period pain or just having periods, I think microdosing psychedelics could be an option for some people. In my experience, I do find that when you couple psychedelics with going inward, whether that's journaling or meditation or yoga, the effects are even better. So in my experience and with the few people that I have known who microdose during their periods, I would say it's a good thing. Because yes, there's a lot going on with your emotions and your body, but ultimately the one thing that holds steady across your lifespan is you, the authentic you, that is the essence of you. And you becoming the conscious witness of what's going on in your life is ultimately what I'm most interested in stimulating. And if microdosing psychedelics really help you become that non-judgmental, compassionate witness, and it may decrease pain and improve mood, I would say, to me, it would sound good. But that's my opinion. Nothing that I've said today should be taken as medical advice. Your case might be completely different to me or any of my colleagues or my clients. So I highly recommend that you touch base with your own healthcare provider or a psychedelic informed therapist. As I mentioned, you can get in touch with me on my website, and if you'd like a consultation, I would be happy to provide that. If you'd like to know about our upcoming retreats in Costa Rica or in Amsterdam, I would love to facilitate for you, all right? So I did not share at the beginning of the hour that if you didn't know by now, I am Dr. 1Dreah Pennington. I am an integrative physician. I've been practicing medicine for 23 years. That's right. I finished medical school in 98, finished at Georgetown in 2000, and used to work in addiction and eating disorders, and then moved into other primary care and age management and hormone optimization. And I stepped onto the psychedelic path starting in 2001 with MDMA. And then in 2007, I was invited to step onto the shamanic path after attending a trance dance workshop. And the shaman there introduced me to ayahuasca. And over the last several years, I've sat in ceremony with ayahuasca for my own healing and my own trauma resolution journey. And then a few years ago, got the call that mushrooms were going to be part of my life. So sat with mushrooms, and after a couple of years, felt really called to facilitate. So in addition to working with private teachers, I also did take a fellowship with the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, along with MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and got certified in psychedelic assisted therapy. And because I'm a physician licensed in the United States, I can also facilitate ketamine journeys. So that's a little bit about me and what I'm up to. I hope that you have found this helpful and insightful. You are most welcome. I thank you for showing up and being here. And thank you, Andy, for tuning in. Andy is one of the contributing authors to a new book that we have out, which is super, super exciting. We have recently published 2 new books this year. One is The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People. Let's see if I can show you that. Voila. And coming next month, Sacred Medicine. Dun, 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 dun. Sacred Medicine, exploring the psychedelic hero's journey. So we have stories from people all around the world who have experienced shamanic and psychedelic journeys, and they have bravely, courageously, lovingly opened up and shared their stories in this book. I shared mine, including why I am now called 1Dreah and not 1Dreah. So I hope that you will check out these books and support our authors. Are there any last questions that have come in? Let me see. Yes, Lisa Bird, you are interested in a consultation. Well, I am here for you. Just visit my website. You can go to innatevitality.com. Let's see if I can put this up there. innatevitality.com. And you will find information about how to join what we call PRISM sessions. That's psychedelic retreats, integration, preparation, and spiritual mentoring. And would love to be of support to you on your journey to find out what's right for you. All right, my friends. Well, it's been lovely to connect with you. I've gotten some email questions coming in, and next week we will take another dive into how psychedelics may support women on their various life journeys. And Svetlana asked, can I give the name to the last book again? Yes, it is called Sacred Medicine. Sacred Medicine. You can find it on Amazon for pre-order. It's exploring the psychedelic hero's journey. And we've got 25 amazing stories from authors around the world. So definitely check that out. All right, my friends. And yeah, I would love to see you at one of our upcoming retreats. If you're not ready for psychedelics, you can also join me at Omega Institute in upstate New York. June 30th to July 2nd, I will be facilitating a workshop called Build Resilience and Nurture Real Self-Love. I will be leading people through the cornerstone process and the attunement meditation. We'll do breath work, we'll do yoga, we'll do journaling and discussion that can help you build resilience. And that's based on my 2 best-selling books, The Real Self-Love Handbook, this one back here, and The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People. You can also come to New York in September 4th through the 8th. I will be co-facilitating a workshop with Dr. Jill Stocker. She is one of my besties, and she is a hormone optimization doc. We won't be doing any psychedelics at Omega, but you can definitely come and tune in, get healthy, get prepared, connect with women. The retreat in September is for women only. It's called Reclaim Your Feminine Power. So if you need to heal from womb trauma or emotional trauma or your heart, definitely come and check us out. And then if you would like to join me in the Netherlands, the first week of August, we're doing a retreat just for women, a sacred medicine retreat with psilocybin truffles, which is completely legal in the Netherlands. And October, another retreat, and that's for men and women, October 20th through the 24th. I'll also be doing a book signing in New York City on July 2nd and in October 13th in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. So many exciting ways that you can meet up with me and experience with and without psychedelics, all the different ways that you can build resilience and improve your well-being and self-love. All right. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your comments and your questions. You will get the replay, the slides, and the resources shortly after this broadcast. I will see you next week for our next installment, or I will see you on the first Saturday of the month in the Sacred Psychedelic Saturday session. All right, take good care, everyone. Bye.